Why is it so noisy in big cities?
Big cities are so noisy because a lot of people and activities are confined to a relatively small space. Think about the activities that happen in a small neighborhood: people talking, car motors running, ambulance sirens blaring, and multiply that several times over. Because cities are usually centers of manufacturing, business, government, and culture, they attract large numbers of people who live and work there. Cities are also home to lots of cars and mass transportation vehicles like buses and trains, all of which produce tremendous noise. And noises in a city often seem louder because the sound waves bounce back and forth between the many tall buildings.
What causes growing pains?
Growing pains usually refers to the aches and pains that children feel in their legs at night when they are lying in bed. Kids seem to get them during growth spurts, times when they are growing a lot. Doctors think that the tendons, the tough elastic straps, or bands, that attach muscles to bones of affected children do not grow quite as fast as their bones do. The tendons eventually catch up, but in the meantime this condition puts muscles under extra stress during an active day and causes them to ache and even spasm, contract abnormally, when they are finally at rest at night. Growing pains are not dangerous. They don't bother children during the day, and they usually come and go at nighttime. Regular stretching exercises keeping the muscles and tendons relaxed often solve the problem for good. But if the pains are very bad and continue for a long time, a doctor should be seen. In rare cases, an infection, disease, injury, or unnoticed malformation of the legs is causing the problem.
How big will I become?
Several different factors determine how big a person will grow. The most important one is heredity, the passing of physical traits from parents to children. When you began as a single fertilized cell, your mother and father each contributed half the genes coded chemical information needed for you to live and grow. These genes are responsible for your physical traits, like the color of your eyes and hair, how your body will be shaped, and how tall you will become. That is why children look a lot like their parents, or even their grandparents. They have inherited family characteristics that may have been passed on for several generations. If your parents are big or tall, chances are good that you will be big or tall, too. The average height of a woman in the United States is about 5 feet, 4 inches. 1.6 meters, and the average height for an American man is 5 feet, 9 inches, 1.75 meters. In spite of genetic coding, certain conditions can keep people from growing as large as their genes say they should. Bad nutrition keeps a body from reaching its maximum size. Poor health and disease do the same. That is why people who lived in generations before us, when food was sometimes scarce and health care was poor, were quite a bit smaller than we are today. Taking good care of your body, then, helps it become the best it can be.
How do farmers grow food?
Raising crops involves a few simple principles. Although farming has been around for about 10,000 years, a vast sweep of time in which tools and methods have changed a great deal, the basic principles remain the same. The first step in farming involves preparing the land for planting. The second step involves planting the seeds, or cuttings or seedlings. The third step involves helping the seeds to grow. The fourth step involves harvesting the mature plants and often processing them so that they can be used as food. Fruit growing and raising livestock for milk and meat are other types of farming. Preparing land for planting involves breaking up the soil with a plow. Early plows were heavy pointed sticks that people pushed through the earth. Later, the points of plows were made of iron, and their shape became broader and flatter. Plow blades are called shears. These plows sliced bigger furrows, big grooves, into the soil and flipped it over as well. While first powered by people, plows were soon designed to be pulled by animals because they had to be heavy to cut through hard ground. Usually a team of oxen or horses pulled a plow while a farmer guided and pushed it from behind. Today, powerful tractors pull plows that dig up several furrows at a time. After plowing, early farmers pulled heavy rollers and harrows, flat rake-like devices over the broken soil to make it even finer and ready for planting. Today, cultivators with rows of pointed metal prongs are pulled behind tractors to do the same job. Before planting machines, farmers sowed seeds by hand. It was a wasteful process because the wind blew seeds away as they were. Scattered and hungry birds ate them before they could be covered up by dirt. But in the early 18th century, an English farmer named Jethro Tull greatly improved the sowing process by inventing the seed drill. It was a machine that cut several grooves into the soil and then dropped small amounts of seeds held in a compartment called a hopper down tubes or chutes into the neat rows. Crops could be grown in straight lines then, which made weeding easier. Special hoeing machines were made with blades that fit between rows of crops to uproot weeds. Like a plow, the seed drill was usually pulled by horses and guided by a farmer who walked behind it. Today, of course, tractors provide the power that pulls similar sowing machines. There was not a lot that early farmers could do to help seeds grow once they were in the ground. At that point, it was really up to nature to provide the things that were needed for growth, like warmth, sunlight, and water in the right amounts. Early farmers could add natural fertilizers, like manure, to enrich soil. and they could pull weeds that competed with growing plants. They knew about the benefits of rotating crops. Growing different plants in different fields each year to keep the soil fertile and free of diseases and pests. In dry areas, early farmers even developed irrigation systems that delivered water to crops. But modern science has given today's farmers many more reliable tools to help seeds grow. Chemical insecticides, for example, kill pests that threaten crops, and selective herbicides kill weeds without damaging growing plants. Other chemicals called fungicides help eliminate plant diseases. In addition, genetically altered plants and chemical fertilizers have allowed modern farmers to grow more plants than ever before. Before modern machinery, harvesting crops was a painstaking process. Gathering and removing mature plants from the field had to be done by hand. Farm workers used sharp blade, long-handled scythes and curved sickles to cut down cereal crops like wheat. Even the fastest reaper could only clear about a third of an acre a day. Because rain could ruin harvested wheat, workers called sheaf makers quickly tied it into bundles, so that it could be safely stored if the weather turned stormy. During the long winter months, farm workers used jointed wooden tools called flails to thresh or beat the dried wheat in order to separate its edible grain seeds from its stalks. But in 1786 a machine that threshed wheat by rubbing it between rollers was invented, replacing human threshers. And around 1840 a reaping machine whose revolving wheel pressed grain stalks against a sharp blade that cut them down replaced human harvesters. Today, farm machines called combine harvesters do this work in much the same way. These machines are very efficient and combine all three jobs of cutting, collecting, and threshing a crop. A single combine harvester can process 5 acres of wheat in less than an hour.
What is quicksand?
Quicksand is regular sand into which water is forced from below. Usually an underground spring supplies the water that pushes up into a deposit of sand. The extra water makes it so the sand particles don't hold together as well, and they become unstable to walk on. Quicksand is like a thick soup of sand and water. It isn't as watery as a puddle but isn't as firm as regular sand either. A large person or animal that strays into quicksand, which often looks deceptively dry on top, can sink quickly, even disappearing under its surface. Deposits of quicksand are rare, and they usually aren't very deep. If you do find yourself sinking into the muck, try to hold on to something solid and pull yourself out. Or lie on your back with your arms out as if you were floating in water and wait for rescuers to come. It's easy enough to float in quicksand if you stay fairly still. Struggling to get out, on the other hand, only makes you sink faster.
What happens to old money?
Hen money gets damaged or dirty or wears out. Commercial banks send the bills to one of the Federal Reserve banks in exchange for new bills. If the Reserve Bank determines that the currency is unfit for circulation, it is destroyed. Damaged coins are returned to the Treasury. While the paper used for currency is more durable than regular paper, it is still fairly delicate and can't stay in circulation very long before getting worn out. Different bills have different lifespans. Smaller bills get handled more and therefore wear out sooner. A $1 bill, for example, usually lasts around 18 months. While a $20 bill can be in circulation for 2 years and a $100 bill for 8.5 years. A coin, naturally, lasts longer, usually around 25 years. It isn't just Federal Reserve banks that can provide new bills in exchange for old ones. Anybody who has money that is torn or damaged can take it to a local bank and get a new bill. As long as more than half of the original bill is intact. A bank should be able to provide a new bill of the same value.
Where does our food come from?
People in industrialized nations like the United States eat food that comes from all over the world. Such countries have the wealth to buy food products that are brought by plane or ship from far away. A wide variety of canned and packaged foods are available from every corner of the globe. And even fresh foods like fruits, vegetables, fish, and meats can now be sped across oceans in refrigerated boats. So foods that were once rare treats are now available at nearly every time of the year. Arriving from places with different climates and seasons. That means that the asparagus and strawberries you eat may be grown nearby or halfway across the world. Today, when you look in your cupboards, it is like taking a trip around the world. You will see tea from India, coffee from Brazil, olive oil from Italy, and much more. In the past, people ate only the food that they could produce on their farms or find at their local markets. That is still true of many people who live in developing nations.
Why are there traffic lights?
Traffic lights were invented to control the safe flow of traffic on streets. They came into widespread use after the invention of the automobile. Until then, people generally didn't require formal traffic rules and control devices, relying instead on polite behavior and common sense when they traveled. But when fast and noisy motor vehicles began to fill the streets, it became clear that traffic control was needed. Lights that stopped some drivers, while allowing others to proceed, was one way to protect both cars and pedestrians, people on foot, from collisions and to avoid traffic buildups. The first traffic light was erected in 1868 in downtown London, England. This redand green tinted gas lantern, hung on a tall iron pole, could be turned in one direction or another by a handle at its base. Of course, at the time, automobiles had not yet been invented. But the number of steam engine vehicles, animal-drawn wagons, and carriages, and pedestrians had become so plentiful at the busy corner at Parliament Square, that a traffic light was needed to prevent accidents. The electric traffic signal was invented by Garrett Morgan, an African-American businessman and inventor, in Cleveland, Ohio. After buying his first automobile, Morgan realized the need for some traffic control at intersections. He invented a traffic light based on the signals used at railroad crossings. He received a patent for it. That is, he registered the invention as his with the government. In 1923, some early traffic signals had red and green lights and a warning buzzer that sounded as the color changed. But as automobile traffic and noise increased, people thought that a visual warning between going and stopping would work better than one that was heard. An amber or yellow light was added to traffic signals to warn drivers to prepare to stop.
How are caves formed?
Caves are hollows in rock, either above or below ground. They are almost always formed when water wears away or dissolves rock. Although disturbances in Earth's crust like earthquakes and volcanoes can also create caves. When ocean waves crash against rocky cliffs, they carve out caves there over time. When an underground stream or rainwater repeatedly flows across the cracks of soft rock, like limestone, or seeps through it, the rock slowly dissolves, and a cave is formed. The world's deepest cave is at Rousseau Jean Bernard, located in France. It is 5,036 feet, 1,535 meters, deep. In Kentucky, at Mammoth Cave National Park, visitors can see the longest cave system. A series of connected caves, in the world. It extends more than 330 miles, 530 kilometers. It would seem that nothing could live or grow in deep caves or long cave systems, so far away from sunlight. But cave explorers have found that this is not true. Caves are home to some strange plants and animals that have adapted to their sunless surroundings. Many have no color or pigment, neither of which would serve a purpose in their pitch-black world. Some animals are sightless for the same reason. Caves are fascinating places because they were the first homes of prehistoric men and women, before they learned to build shelters. Caves often hold clues to what life was like when people were in their earliest stages of development. Fossil remains, ancient tools, and even primitive paintings made by cave dwellers can be found in some caves.
What is the highest place on Earth?
The highest place on the surface of Earth is the top of Mt. Everest, in the central Himalayas. A mountain system located on the border between Nepal and Tibet in southern Asia. Everest rises to 29,028 feet, 8,848 meters, above sea level. On May 28, 1953, New Zealander Sir Edmund Hillary and Nepal native Tenzing Norgay were the first people to successfully make the trip to the top of Everest. Since then many mountain climbers have tried to reach the peak, few have succeeded.
How does money circulate?
After new money is printed at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, the United States Treasury Department ships it to the 12 Federal Reserve banks that are spread throughout the country. The reserve banks then distribute the cash to commercial banks and other institutions where people keep their money. Customers withdraw cash from banks and spend it on gas, food, books, and so on. Eventually the stores deposit the bills back at the bank, and the process begins again.
What is puberty?
Puberty is a time of tremendous change, physical and emotional, that everyone experiences on his or her way to becoming an adult. After the many changes of puberty, people are physically able to reproduce, or have children. Though it takes many more years to develop the emotional maturity required for such a decision. While there are many common elements, every person experiences puberty a little bit differently. And kids go through the changes of puberty at all different paces. Some develop early, others late. Girls experience different changes than boys. Puberty can be exciting, but it can also be confusing, scary, and lonely. The changes associated with puberty are triggered by the release of certain hormones. Primarily estrogen for girls and testosterone for boys, that signal the body to grow and change. Puberty usually starts between the ages of 8 and 13 for girls and between 10 and 15 for boys. Though it's normal for some kids to develop later. During puberty, kids' bodies will not only grow taller, they will also change their basic shapes. Hair that was formerly soft and downy in places like the armpits, genital area, and, for boys, the face begins to grow in thicker and darker. During puberty, girls develop breasts, their waists get narrower, and their hips broaden. Some girls are alarmed to notice that they gain weight or fill out during puberty, but this change is normal and healthy. It's not a good idea to try to counteract the normal growth of puberty with dieting. The female hormones released at puberty eventually trigger menstruation. During each menstrual cycle, which is usually about a month long, an egg is released from one of two ovaries in a girl or woman's body. If the egg were fertilized by sperm, it would implant in the uterus or womb, and eventually grow into a baby. The uterus prepares for pregnancy each cycle by creating a lining of extra tissue and blood that would nourish a growing fetus. If the egg is unfertilized, that lining is expelled through the vagina. A missed period could be a normal occurrence. Many women have irregular cycles, or it may be a sign of pregnancy. Boys' bodies change in different ways during puberty. They get broader shoulders, more developed muscles, and larger penises and testes. Their faces change to look more adult, and their voices deepen as well. Kids going through puberty often notice emotional changes that accompany the physical transformation. Part of the emotional roller coaster of puberty comes from the hormones coursing through your body. And part of it is just confusion and fear about changing from a kid to an adult. It's important to remember, though, that everyone goes through it. And often it can really help to talk about these feelings with a friend or a trusted adult.
Where does dirt come from?
Dirt, or more accurately, soil, is the surface layer of earth in which plants can grow. It can be a few inches deep or extend down for several feet. It is made up of tiny pieces of rock of various sizes and shapes. Along with air, water, and humus, which is the decomposed remains of plants. The more humus soil contains, the better it can hold the nutrients and water that plants need to grow. The different types of rocks that make up soil are usually fine particles of parent rocks that lie farther below Earth's surface. These have been made fine by erosion worn by wind and water, or by geological occurrences like volcanic eruptions and the movement of glaciers. There are many kinds of rocks composed of different minerals and formed in different ways that make up Earth's crust.
What is the most important organ in my body?
While many of our organs are vital, meaning we could not live without them, the brain is the most complex and the most important part of our bodies. The brain is the body's command center. Everything we do, eating, talking, walking, thinking, remembering, sleeping, is controlled and processed by the brain. Our brain tells us what's going on outside our bodies, whether we are cold or hot, for instance, or whether the person we see coming toward us is a friend or a stranger, as well as what's going on inside our bodies. Whether we have an infection or a broken bone, or whether we feel happy or sad. The key to the body's nervous system, the brain, contains billions, between 10 billion and 100 billion, of nerve cells, or neurons. Neurons combine to form the body's nerves. Thin cords that spread from head to toe and all parts in between. Neurons take in and send out electrical signals, called impulses, that control or respond to everything your body does and feels. The brain is like a very busy, high-speed post office. Constantly receiving messages and sending them out all the time, it handles millions of nerve impulses every second. An interesting fact about the brain, while it is responsible for receiving and transmitting all messages of pain for the whole body, the brain itself does not have pain receptors. That means that, if you could somehow gain access to another person's brain, you could poke it or pinch it and that person wouldn't feel the pain. The human brain is divided into three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brain stem. The largest part of the brain, about 85% of its total weight. The cerebrum controls emotions, thought, memory, and speech. It is divided into a right and left side, called hemispheres. And each side is divided further into parts called lobes. Its thick outer covering, called the cortex, is made up of a type of tissue called gray matter. The cerebellum coordinates the kinds of movements we don't usually think about. It helps us walk upright and in a straight line, it keeps us balanced so we don't tip over. And it gives us coordination so we can run and play. The brain stem connects the brain with the spinal cord. It controls our body's vital processes, like breathing, digestion, and heart rate.
Why are there so many big trucks on the road?
The purpose of most trucks is to transport goods. Trucks carry materials and parts for manufacturing, finished goods, and food items from the places where they are produced to the places where they are needed. Everything that you see in a store got there by truck. No wonder there are so many trucks on the road. The bigger the truck, the more goods it can carry during a single trip. But for safety reasons, the length of trucks as well as the amount of weight that they are allowed to carry is often regulated. Even things produced overseas eventually make their way to you by truck. Either flown over by cargo plane or shipped by boat. The goods eventually make their way into trucks as they start their overland journey. Not too long ago, though, most goods were transported especially over long distances by railroad. Some still are. But trucks gradually took over the job as roadways expanded and improved. Trucks were preferable because they could take goods directly to their destinations while trains could only travel between stations. When you look at how many abandoned railroad yards and tracks there are around the country, it helps you realize the important role they once played in transporting goods.
Why do we use money?
We use money as payment for goods or services. Today people use coins, banknotes, bills, checks, credit cards, and debit cards. The cards used at automatic teller machines, or ATMs, to pay for things. Before money was invented, You could only get something from another person by bartering or trading something else for it. It was hard to make even trades and the deal had to be made on the spot. The introduction of money offered people greater flexibility when trying to get goods or services. It made it possible to put standard values on things, and money could be saved and used for future purchases. A great variety of objects have served as money for different people around the world. Anything considered valuable by a group and important to its way of life can be used as money. Shells and feathers, furs and cloth, salt and cattle have all been used at one time or another as money, setting the standard by which the value of all other things were measured. From earliest times, precious metals like gold and silver were used as money because they were durable. Materials that could be easily handled and divided, and they were considered valuable by many groups of people. Carefully weighed amounts of these metals were used as money. A practice that led to the invention of coins in the 7th century BC in the kingdom of Lydia, what is now Turkey. Early metal coins were stamped with designs that showed their weight and value, similar to the coins we use today. Money bills or banknotes came into use around the 10th century in China. Because Chinese coins were so heavy, people started to leave them with merchants, who gave them written receipts that were sometimes used to buy things. The Chinese government soon took over the job of printing receipts that people could use as money. While they are just pieces of paper and not valuable themselves, banknotes became money because they represented valuable things like gold and silver kept in other places. Coins, too, eventually became symbols of value rather than actually being worth something. The coins that were once made of silver and other precious metals are now made of combinations of inexpensive metals. The bills, checks, and credit cards that we use today are likewise representative money used because of their convenience.
How do farmers keep animals from eating their crops?
Farmers keep animals away from their crops in a number of ways. Birds are probably the biggest wildlife pests because they feed on seeds before they have a chance to grow, and they eat developing food plants. Because loud noises and the presence of predators and people frighten birds, farmers have used things like scarecrows and models of bird predators, like hawks hung from poles or trees to try to keep hungry creatures away. Devices called bird scarers, which make repeated, loud, shotgun-like bangs, are also used. But before scarers were invented, it was usually the job of farm children to stand in fields, in all kinds of weather, using wooden clappers, rattles, and other noisemakers to keep birds away from crops. Other crop enemies in the animal world are insects. Sometimes insect damage can be controlled by introducing beneficial insects that eat the bugs causing the problem. But generally farmers take stronger measures, like spraying chemical insecticides that poison the pests. Sprayers pulled by tractors are usually used, though airplanes Crop dusters can spray a large field very quickly.
How long will I live?
Because medical science has eliminated or brought under control many of the diseases that once kept people from reaching old age, it is likely that you will live a very long time. Today, the average life expectancy of a man living in the United States is around 74 years. The average American woman will reach the age of 80. Just 100 years ago, the average lifespan was more than 25 years shorter. And because medical science continues to improve healthcare and is studying old age and trying to find ways to slow it, people are expected to live even longer. Many factors contribute to a long life. Usually people live longer in Western Europe and North America, and in Japan, than in Latin America, Asia, or Africa. Average lifespans are longer in wealthier, developed, politically stable countries where safe and hygienic housing, healthy diets, and good medical care are common. Another important factor that determines long life is the genetic information you inherit from your parents, which give you certain physical and health characteristics. If your great-grandparents and grandparents reached old age, for instance, you have a good chance of reaching it yourself. But even if they didn't, don't be concerned. You can overcome a lot of inherited traits simply by following a healthy lifestyle. Eating a good diet, getting regular medical care, and keeping physically active all contribute to a longer life.
What keeps the bones of my skeleton together?
Your skeleton makes up the hard, strong framework of your body. Your skeleton can move easily because it consists of many bones connected by flexible joints. Joints are kept together by elastic straps called ligaments and by a smooth, flexible tissue called cartilage, which covers and joins the ends of bones. Muscles are usually attached to bones by other tough elastic straps, or bands, called tendons. During movement, when muscles contract, it is the rope-like tendons that pull bones into their new positions.
Where does sand come from?
The rock particles that make up soil come in different sizes and are given different names to show this. Sand, often called a grain, is a piece of rock that measures from 0.0024 to 0.08 inches. 0.06 to 2 millimeters, across. Sand results when larger rocks disintegrate, eroded by water, weather, and glaciers. The two greatest deposits of sand on Earth's surface can be found in deserts and on beaches. When soil consists mostly of sand, its large grains cannot hold the water or nutrients needed. For healthy plant growth, one reason you don't see many plants in the desert or on the beach. When you look closely at a handful of sand, you may find that the grains are really many different colors. This is because sand comes from several different kinds of rocks. Sand may appear brown, yellow, white, or even black, when it comes from certain volcanic rock. The sand of some beaches may also have grains made of organic material, the remains of living creatures, like shells and coral instead of rock.
Why are there parking meters?
Finding a place to park in a big city is usually a problem because land space is so limited. In fact, one of the reasons that most big cities have mass transportation systems is because they don't have enough space for all the people who live, work, and visit there to use and park cars. Parking meters first used in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, in 1935 were invented to help solve the traffic and parking problems of big cities. By charging drivers for parking spaces and limiting their time there, parking meters encourage people to leave more quickly, which allows other drivers to use the spaces. The devices also encourage people to use public transportation to and from and within a city because parking is so expensive. This, in turn, reduces the number of cars on city streets, cutting down on traffic, noise, and pollution. Another benefit of parking meters is that the money they bring in can be used for city needs.
What is organic farming?
While most large farms today use chemicals to control weeds and insects and to produce increased amounts of vegetables, milk, or eggs, some farmers have chosen to run their farms without chemicals. Organic farmers believe that the chemicals many farmers use can be damaging to the environment and to the people that eat the food grown on such farms. They feel that natural fertilizers and pest control methods are just as effective and far healthier. A British farmer and scientist named Albert Howard began the practice of organic farming as an alternative to modern chemical-based methods in the 1930s. His ideas have spread all over the world, taking hold in the United States in the late 1940s. A basic principle of organic farming is to focus on keeping the soil rich with nutrients by feeding it natural fertilizers like cow manure. Such fertile soil can help create stronger plants that are better able to resist disease and insects. Organic farmers also prevent insect damage by putting up insect traps or by bringing in beneficial insects that feed on the harmful ones that are causing the problem. In extreme cases, they need to use pesticides, but to continue being certified as organic farmers in the United States, such farmers need to use botanical pesticides. Those that are made from plants, rather than synthetic, or man-made, chemicals. Organic farmers also try to do more tasks using human power rather than gas-powered vehicles. thereby using less fuel and cutting down on pollution. Organic farms that raise livestock like dairy cows or chickens feed the animals with natural food. Avoiding chemicals and growth hormones that make cows produce more milk and chickens produce more eggs. Some organic farmers also allow their animals to roam in a large area. Such animals are described as free range. Rather than keeping them in small, climate-controlled pens for their entire lives. While organic farming began in a small way in experimental gardens and small family-run farms, it has grown into a huge industry. As more and more people looked for organically grown fruits and vegetables in their grocery stores, more and more companies began producing certified organic foods. At the beginning of the 21st century, organic farming was a $7.70 billion per year industry in the United States, a small but significant percentage of the entire food selling industry.
What is the lowest place on Earth?
The lowest place on the surface of Earth is believed to be in the Mariana Trench, located deep in the western Pacific Ocean, extending southeast of the island of Guam to northwest of the Mariana Islands. It reaches down 36,198 feet, 11,034 meters, below sea level.
What is my belly button?
Your belly button, or navel, is a scar where your umbilical cord once was. The tube-like cord connected you to your mother when you were inside her uterus, growing into a baby. It carried oxygen and nourishment to you from the placenta, an organ that develops in the uterus during pregnancy, connecting you to your mother's blood supply. It also carried away waste products from your blood. Once you were born, the umbilical cord was no longer needed, because you began to breathe and eat on your own. The cord was clamped off and cut, and what was left of it withered and dropped off about a week after your birth.
Why does everyone look different?
Genes inherited from your parents decide how you look. They determine the color of your eyes, skin, hair, and so much more. They decide how your face will look, how your body will be shaped, and how tall you will grow. There are thousands and thousands of these influential genes inside each one of us. When you first began, a sperm cell from your father carrying half the genes that you would inherit fertilized an egg cell from your mother, which had the other half. These two sets of genes contained all the information needed to create a new human being. So the genes you inherited from your mother gave you some of your features, while the genes you got from your father gave you others. Or their genes may have combined to give you traits that are controlled by many genes. The random mix of genes explains why you may resemble your parents but still have a special look all your own. And it also explains why brothers and sisters can look so different from each other. People from all over the world may look very different from one another, too. Some have very dark skin and curly hair. Others have almond-shaped eyes and dark, straight hair. Still others have light skin, hair, and eyes. The ancestors of these people came from different parts of the world, where distinct genes not shared by other people were inherited and passed on. Still, the number of genes that make people of the world look different is very small compared to the huge number that we all share as human beings.
What are barns used for?
Today, the huge, airy farm structures we know as barns are used mostly to store modern farm machinery and house farm animals. But before modern farming, they had a greater number of important uses. Before the invention of threshing machines, which separate cereal grains like wheat from their stalks, the grain harvest had to be stored in barns, where it would await threshing or pounding by hand during winter months. The structures had to be large and drafty for the process of winnowing, which separated straw dust from the grains after threshing. Before farmers began to raise special crops to feed their livestock during the winter, they used hay, which is dried grass, grown wild or taken from the stalks of cereal crops. Huge amounts enough to last several months had to be stored away. Hay was usually kept in barn lofts located above the main floor, where farm animals spent the winter. This high storage place allowed air to circulate around the hay, keeping it from rotting. It was convenient, too, because hay could be pulled down as needed to feed the livestock. Because farmers had to store their harvest crops in barns, they wisely cut entrance holes near their roofs, inviting barn owls to make nests there. The birds would hunt the rats and mice that liked to feed on the grain.
How did my life begin?
All living things are made up of cells. They are so small that you need a microscope to see them. Your body contains trillions and trillions of cells. Each part of your body is made up of different kinds of cells. Bone cells, brain cells, blood cells, and more. Each person begins life as a single fertilized cell. This single cell contains all the information needed for a new human being to grow and live. The information-coded chemical instructions known as genes is found on 23 pairs of chromosomes in the nucleus, or control center, of the cell. That special fertilized cell began with a single egg cell from your mother. Each month a woman releases a mature, or ripe, egg cell from reproductive organs called ovaries. This egg contains half the genes needed to create a new life. A man produces millions of sperm cells in reproductive organs called testes. Each sperm cell contains half the genes needed to create a new life. When a sperm cell from your father joined with and fertilized the released egg cell inside your mother's body, the cell that would become you was complete. It had all the coded instructions it needed to begin dividing and growing into a baby. Within a few hours, the fertilized cell that was you split into two complete cells, each with a full set of genes inside. Before long the cells divided again. After 5 or 6 days a ball of hundreds of cells existed. The size of the head of a pin, this ball of cells attached to the lining of your mother's uterus. Or womb, the reproductive organ in which babies grow. There, in the nourishing lining of the uterus, the cells continued to multiply. Gradually the cells began to specialize, turning into nerve cells, muscle cells, and so on. A tiny baby began to take shape. As you grew, you received nutrients and oxygen from your mother's blood through a special tube that was attached to your abdomen called the umbilical cord. After 40 weeks, between 9 and 10 months, all of your organs and body systems were developed enough to work on their own, and you were ready to enter the world. Then you made your grand entrance and were born.
Why are people right-handed or left-handed?
The way your brain works determines whether you are right or left-handed. The left half of your brain controls the right side of your body, and the right side of your brain controls the left side of your body. Because one side of the brain is always stronger or more dominant, there is one side of the body that is more developed and skilled, too. For most people, about 90%, more females than males. It is the left side of the brain that is dominant, making them right-handed, and right-footed, too. Scientists don't know why the brains of left-handed people develop in a reverse way. But it makes absolutely no difference. In fact, because left-handed people have to get along in a right-handed world, using tools, machines, and instruments designed for right-handers, they are often pretty skilled with their non-dominant hand, too. Scientists think that may be why left-handed baseball players are better hitters than those who are right-handed. There are also a few people who are ambidextrous, which means that they can do a task equally well with either hand. And some people are mixed-handed, performing some tasks better with the left hand and some with the right.
How are islands made?
Islands can be created in a couple of ways. Either they are connected, or were once connected, to the continent that they are located near. Or they arise through the ocean floor during volcanic activity or other disturbances in Earth's crust. A continental island as the first kind is called may be a high part of the continental margin or extension of land that is usually present underwater along a coastline, or may have been separated from its parent continent by a watery passageway carved out by the sea. Great Britain and Japan are examples of continental islands. The islands of Hawaii, on the other hand, are examples of oceanic islands. Because they were formed by volcanic activity on the floor of the Pacific Ocean some 40 million years ago.
How deep are the oceans?
The ocean floors have shelves, slopes, cliffs, mountains, valleys, and canyons, just like the surface of Earth. So the depth of each ocean varies greatly when measured in different places. The average depth of all the oceans is around 13,124 feet, 4,000 meters. Though the Arctic Ocean is by far the shallowest, along the underwater edges of the continents. In what is called the continental margins, are deep, narrow canyons known as trenches. In these trenches are the ocean's greatest depths. The Pacific Ocean's Mariana Trench extends down 36,198 feet, 11,034 meters, the Atlantic's Puerto Rico Trench reaches 28,374 feet, 8,648 meters, below sea level. The Indian Ocean's Java Trench descends for 25,344 feet, 7,725 meters, and the Arctic's Eurasia Basin reaches 17,881 feet, 5,450 meters, in depth. People can descend to the deepest parts of the oceans only in special vehicles. The deep sea is cold and sunless, and the pressure from the water above is almost crushing. But from ships on the surface, scientists can use sonar, or sound waves, to determine the depth of the seas and the shape of ocean floors. An instrument called an echo sounder sends out sound signals, which travel through water at nearly 1 mile per second. The signals are reflected back to the ship in echoes that show how far away the ocean floor is. The longer the echoes take to reach the ship, the deeper the water.
What does the brain look like?
The pinkish-gray spongy tissue that makes up most of the brain's outer covering is folded over many times onto itself, forming numerous ridges. These folds allow the brain to have a larger surface area and more room for lots of nerve cells than it would have if it were smooth. The brain is one of the largest organs in the human body. From about age 6 onward, the brain weighs about 3 pounds, 1.4 kilograms. While that's only about 2% of an average person's body weight. The brain uses about 20% of the body's oxygen. And if it's deprived of that oxygen for longer than a few minutes, it can become seriously damaged.
What are stalactites and stalagmites?
Caves form in huge, thick deposits of rocks like limestone, which dissolves over time when rainwater passes over or seeps through it. As water drips through the roof of a limestone cave, the drips leave bits of mineral behind, causing a stone column called a stalactite to form, which grows down in a cone shape like an icicle. Where the drips hit the cave floor, leaving behind more minerals. A stone column called a stalagmite forms, growing up. One way to remember which word describes which kind of growth is to think of stalactites as holding tight to the ceiling. The G in stalagmites can stand for the word ground. Stalactites and stalagmites can become very large. And sometimes they meet in the middle, forming a single column or pillar of stone. The largest stalactite in the world is located in a cavern in County Clare, Ireland. It measures more than 23 feet, 7 meters, long. The largest stalagmite known to exist is located near Lozère in southern France. It measures more than 95 feet, 29 meters, in length and is still growing.
How many oceans are there?
The world has 4 oceans: the Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, and Arctic. Sometimes the water that surrounds the continent of Antarctica is called the Antarctic Ocean, which would then bring the total to 5. Because all of the oceans are connected to each other, some people consider them to be one gigantic world ocean that is divided into 4, or, if the Antarctic waters are regarded separately, 5 parts. The Arctic Ocean is about 5,440,000 square miles, 14,103,626 square kilometers, in area. The Antarctic covers 12,450,000 square miles, 32,253,886 square kilometers. The Indian Ocean has an area of 28,380,000 square miles, 73,523,316 square kilometers. And the Atlantic extends over 41 million square miles, 106,217,610 square kilometers. The greatest of the oceans, the Pacific, has an area of 64,186,000 square miles, 166,284,970 square kilometers. The Pacific Ocean is by far the deepest, in the Mariana Trench, which extends southeast of the island of Guam to northwest of the Mariana Islands. The ocean floor is 36,198 feet, 11,034 meters, down. The tallest underwater mountain called a seamount is also located in the Pacific Ocean. Mauna Kea rises from the ocean floor and extends above the water surface in Hawaii. It measures 33,480 feet. 10,205 meters, in height, which is even taller than the world's biggest surface peak. Mount Everest, though Mauna Kea's peak is only 13,796 feet, or 4,205 meters, above sea level. The oceans hold 322,280,000 cubic miles, 1,347,000,000 cubic kilometers, of salt water. If you have an aquarium, you know how heavy water can be. Each cubic mile of seawater weighs 4.7 billion tons. That's 9.4 trillion pounds, or 4.3 trillion kilograms.
How much of Earth's surface is covered by water?
About 71% of Earth's surface is covered by water. 3% of this supply consists of fresh water, most of which is found in glaciers and ice caps, with a small percentage in rivers, lakes, and streams. The remaining 97% of the world's bodies of water is saltwater seas and oceans. While all bodies of salt water can be referred to as seas. Technically, a sea is different from an ocean because it is smaller and at least somewhat surrounded by land.
How many bones do I have?
Babies are born with about 330 bones. But many of them join together during the process of growing up, creating fewer, larger bones. Adults have 206 bones. Some people end up with a few extra bones, though. In the arches of their feet or as an extra set of ribs in their rib cage. Many bones are shaped to protect and support soft body parts. The curved bones of your skull, for instance, enclose and protect your brain, your body's command center. The ribs form a cage that protects your heart and lungs. Your wrists, hands, ankles, and feet contain more than half the bones of your body. Usually the more bones, joints, and muscles you have in a spot, the more flexible it is. That is why you can make such small, precise movements with your hands and feet. Like tying a bow or balancing on your tiptoes.
What is an island?
An island is a body of land surrounded by water. While continents are also bodies of land surrounded by water, they are much larger in size. The smallest continent of the world is Australia. It has almost 3 million square miles, close to 8 million square kilometers, of area. That makes it almost 4 times the size of the world's biggest island, Greenland, which has an area of around 840,000 square miles, 2,175,000 square kilometers.
What is the biggest bone in my body?
The longest and strongest bone in the human body is the thigh bone, or femur. In a man 6 feet, 1.8 meters, tall, the femur would measure about 20 inches, 51 centimeters, in length. Leg bones are very strong because they have to carry the weight of the body and move it from one place to another.
What is the biggest bone in my body?
The longest and strongest bone in the human body is the thigh bone, or femur. In a man 6 feet, 1.8 meters, tall, the femur would measure about 20 inches, 51 centimeters, in length. Leg bones are very strong because they have to carry the weight of the body and move it from one place to another.
What is the smallest bone in my body?
The smallest bone in your body is the stirrup, located in the middle ear. It is about the size of a grain of rice. It is named that because it looks just like a tiny stirrup. The part on a horse's saddle on which you rest your foot. When sound waves enter your ear canal, they vibrate your eardrum. The three tiny bones behind it also vibrate, increasing the strength of the sound as it passes through the middle ear. The stirrup, along with the hammer and the anvil bones, also named for their shapes, transfer their vibrations to the inner ear, where they become nerve impulses and travel to your brain.
What is the smallest bone in my body?
The smallest bone in your body is the stirrup, located in the middle ear. It is about the size of a grain of rice. It is named that because it looks just like a tiny stirrup. The part on a horse's saddle on which you rest your foot. When sound waves enter your ear canal, they vibrate your eardrum. The three tiny bones behind it also vibrate, increasing the strength of the sound as it passes through the middle ear. The stirrup, along with the hammer and the anvil bones, also named for their shapes, transfer their vibrations to the inner ear, where they become nerve impulses and travel to your brain.
How do I know if I've broken a bone?
Bones break when too much stress is applied by physical forces. Breaks usually occur when a person is injured playing sports, or when he or she is involved in an accident. Bone diseases can also cause breaks. With serious breaks called compound fractures, you know something is wrong because the bone sticks out through the skin, and muscles and other tissue are damaged around it. But a lot of bone breaks are simple fractures, where the bone has broken cleanly instead of splintering, and it doesn't push out through the skin. In such cases, it is hard to know if you have broken a bone. or if the pain you're feeling is caused by a pulled muscle or a sprained joint. A fractured bone usually causes a lot of pain, and the injured area may look swollen or be shaped funny. Still, the only way to tell if you have a broken bone for sure is to have it X-rayed. X-rays, short-wave radiation that can pass through flesh but not bone. Leaving a picture on photographic film or plates can detect a break in a bone. If your bone is broken, the pieces will have to be held together in the right position in order to heal properly, growing back together as before. Sometimes a hard cast or splint is used to keep the injured body part from moving for a few weeks. Some broken bones are held together naturally, by the muscles that surround them. And in serious cases, metal screws, nails, and plates keep the ends of broken bones in place as they heal. Healing time depends on the bone broken and the age of the injured person. The bones of children heal very quickly.
How do I know if I've broken a bone?
Bones break when too much stress is applied by physical forces. Breaks usually occur when a person is injured playing sports, or when he or she is involved in an accident. Bone diseases can also cause breaks. With serious breaks called compound fractures, you know something is wrong because the bone sticks out through the skin, and muscles and other tissue are damaged around it. But a lot of bone breaks are simple fractures, where the bone has broken cleanly instead of splintering, and it doesn't push out through the skin. In such cases it is hard to know if you have broken a bone, or if the pain you're feeling is caused by a pulled muscle or a sprained joint. A fractured bone usually causes a lot of pain, and the injured area may look swollen or be shaped funny. Still, the only way to tell if you have a broken bone for sure is to have it X-rayed. X-rays, short-wave radiation that can pass through flesh but not bone. Leaving a picture on photographic film or plates can detect a break in a bone. If your bone is broken, the pieces will have to be held together in the right position in order to heal properly, growing back together as before. Sometimes a hard cast or splint is used to keep the injured body part from moving for a few weeks. Some broken bones are held together naturally, by the muscles that surround them. And in serious cases, metal screws, nails, and plates keep the ends of broken bones in place as they heal. Healing time depends on the bone broken and the age of the injured person. The bones of children heal very quickly.